the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday, January 9th. It is 8 p.m. here in Puerto Rico. It's all kinds of time zones depending on where you are. All right, so we're going to talk about Israel today. We're going to talk not so much about Israel, but we're going to talk about trying to understand maybe the Israeli mindset, try to understand where Israel comes from, and then also try to understand the Palestinian mindset a little bit, and really see why the Palestinians just don't get it in kind of a visceral sense, a fundamental sense. They just don't get it. They have a wrong paradigm. The way they think about this is completely screwed up. Put aside freedom, rights, all of that. I want to talk about what motivates Israelis, and then talk about how that fits into the whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict war situation. I know we've talked about this a lot, but I heard this interview on Econ Talk. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Econ Talk. Econ Talk is a phenomenal economics podcast by Russ Roberts. It's primarily free market economics, and he's been doing it for many years, and I highly recommend it if you're interested in economics at all. Anyway, Russ is, I don't know how many years ago, but relatively recently, I think, has moved to Israel and has a joint position in Israel and I think at Stanford, at the Hoover Institute. And he's been doing some podcasts about the situation in Israel as well. And he interviewed this Israeli journalist and historian by the name of Haviv Rettig Gur. Haviv Rettig Gur. And I thought the interview was fascinating. It was really, really interesting. It covered a lot of history that I knew at some point in my life, but it integrated it and it kind of referenced it, but in passing, during my talks on the rise and decline of the State of Israel and my various talks about Israel. But he reminded me of it and, made, I think, a compelling case that, again, is completely consistent with the cases I've made in the past, but places a little bit of a different emphasis. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is good stuff, really good stuff, and important stuff. And it would be worthwhile to do a show covering this material, which I don't think, my guess is that you guys don't know this material. That is, this is history. The most of you, maybe some of you know it, but most of you just don't know it. But I don't think you can understand Israel. I don't think you can understand the attitude of Israelis from the founding, from before the founding of Israel, certainly all the way to today. I don't think you can really understand without understanding this history. So I thought it would be valuable. And then I want to, in that context, look at the Palestinians and look at their attitudes and why they can't succeed. They can't win. So we're going to delve into a little bit of the history of anti-Semitism. Now, for most people, anti-Semitism is kind of this vague notion of, yeah, there was persecution of the Jews for thousands of years, and then there was the Holocaust, and the Holocaust is the main event, if you will. And it is really the motivation behind the creation of State of Israel, the argument is, and it is the ultimate expression of anti-Semitism, but it's kind of viewed as, in some sense, this aberration, this almost came out of nowhere, and suddenly 6 million Jews were slaughtered. And the other association of the Holocaust is very much that this is Germany. The Germans did this, and the Germans are responsible. The Germans killed 6 million Jews, and it's all on Germany. So I want to challenge those assumptions and kind of give a broader history of anti-Semitism, at least in the 20th century, and then talk about it in the context of the creation and establishment of the State of Israel, because I don't think you can understand the creation of the State of Israel. I don't think you can comprehend what Zionism means. I mean, the source of Zionism without understanding this anti-Semitic history. Now, I have said often that Zionism's the core basis for Zionism and the only rational basis of Zionism as a movement of self-defense. And what I found interesting in Haviv Redding Gur's analysis is he basically 100% concurs with that. And he puts it in slightly different language. Basically, that's what he's saying. And yeah, so it was nice to get affirmation. But he gave it a historical context that I think you guys will find interesting. And I hope you guys will find interesting. So to understand modern anti-Semitism, to understand the creation of the State of Israel, to understand what happened in Europe in the 20th century, you have to go back really to 1881. 1881 was the year in which the Tsar of Russia was murdered by anarchists. You know, we don't need to get into Russian history, but the point is that following the murder of the Tsar, a series of what has come to be known as pogroms occurred in Russia, primarily in the south, primarily in what today is Ukraine, Poland, and to some extent in the northwest in Latvia and Lithuania. But certainly the bulk of it was in Ukraine. To a large extent, the reason for this is the Jews were just not allowed to live in what we consider today Russia proper. They weren't allowed to live in kind of the eastern parts of Russia. Russia had inherited many of these Jews from in the conquests. They'd inherited them when they conquered the Lithuanian Polish empire that existed in Ukraine and Poland and Lithuania. And they inherited these Jews. They didn't really want them. They didn't really like them. But they stuck with them. And they basically had laws that said, you just can't go to certain places. This is where you need to be. Anyway, in 1981, an anarchist group assassinated the Tsar of Russia. Tsar Alexander, I think it's Alexander II, was replaced by his son, Alexander III. And whereas Alexander Alexander II was relatively liberal, pro-West, Alexander III was a conservative, really Russian Orthodox, religious, uninterested in any kind of reforms to the system, and ultimately blamed the fact that his father was pro-reform for the fact that he was dead. But part of the murder is that Jews were somehow blamed for the murder of the Tsar. Not so much by the Russian authorities, but by local administrators, by local people in various areas within Russia. Again, primarily in what is today Ukraine, the Odessa area, and generally the southern Russian Empire. They blamed the Jews for this, and they started a series of pogroms against the Jews. What are pogroms? There's attacks against Jews, attacks in which they might beat the Jews up, they might kill some of them, they might rape them, they might torture them. They would do something similar to what Hamas did on a smaller local scale in a variety of different towns and cities all over the western part of the Russian Empire. And this started a real series of these. And if you think about what was going on in Russia at the time and kind of the social pressures and the kind of the sociological reasons for this, it had very little to do at the end of the day with the Tsar dying and any issue regarding the Tsar. It primarily was a consequence of the fact that there was a lot of change. This is the Industrial Revolution is starting to come to Russia towards the end of the 19th century. Industrialization is happening. Urbanization is happening. There's just a lot of angst, a lot of changes, a lot of people losing their jobs. And people are looking to blame somebody for this social upheaval. And the other, we've talked about this many, many times in the Yaron Brook Show, the other is always a good target to blame for what you cannot understand, for what you cannot explain. And the other, in this case, were the Jews. The Jews who lived in small towns, the Jews who lived sometimes in the larger cities. And as a consequence, throughout Russia, there were these pogroms. Thousands of Jews were killed. Again, not just killing, beating, burning their homes, stealing their stuff, raping their women. All over Russia, this was going on. And as a consequence of this, Russian Jews started leaving. 3 million Jews left Russia during this period. They started moving west. The vast majority of them landed up getting on boats out of Lithuania, Latvia, out of Poland, out of Germany, getting on boats and sailing to the United States. 2.5 million Jews escaped Europe and came to the United States during the end of the 19th century. 2.5 million. The other 500,000 settled in different parts of Western Europe, including places like Germany, where they were not exactly welcome. They were not wanted. Between 1880 and 1921, the 2.5 million moved to Europe. Now, you have to understand the difference, and this is, again, a lot of this material is from, I don't want to be accused of plagiarism, right? A lot of this material is from this interview with an article that Haviv Rettinger wrote and from this interview. But the Jewish immigration to the United States is very different than the Irish, Italian, German, Polish, non-Jewish immigrations. Most of these other immigrants sent the young men to America. And if the young men arriving in America settled and could get a job and create some wealth and create an environment, they would then bring their families, and their families would join them in America, whether that is the German migrants who settled in the Midwest. I mean, there's so many German migrants in America. We don't even think of a German, a subculture. They're just everywhere, particularly in the Midwest, all the way down to Texas. Texas is predominantly German, all the way up to Wisconsin and Minnesota. But young men would come, and then the family would follow once they got established. And many of these young men actually went back to Europe. Depending on the particular migrant group, many of these migrants, up to sometimes half of them, didn't make it in America and actually got on a boat and went back to Europe. When the Jews came to America, they were running away. When the Jews came to America, the whole family came. Everybody came. Nobody was left behind. Right. Nobody was left behind. And they came here as, whole groups, as families, and almost nobody went back. Less than 5% of Jews went back to Europe because they didn't make it. And it's not because they were more successful than other immigrants. It's because they literally had nowhere to go back to. Now, if you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof, right? If you haven't, it's definitely worth seeing. There's a movie of the musical. It's a musical. And in Fiddler on the Roof, I mean, the reason they leave is because their place is burnt down. They're hounded. They're persecuted. Once they come to America, they cannot go back. There's no way for them to go back to. And you have to understand this. This is a crucial point about Jewish migration. Jewish migrants went to where they thought anti-Semitism would be less, where they thought they would be safe, and they knew they could never go back to where they came from. There is one particular pogrom that I think has a lasting, cultural weight in Israel and among Jews that still know anything about the history. And that is the pogrom in Kishinev. This is, when was this? I had this a minute ago. The pogrom in Kishinev is not far from Odessa. It's southern Ukraine. And one second, let me just do this. Sorry. Slightly wandering around here and was not completely prepared. Okay. Kishinev happens in 1903. It is this town in southern Ukraine, not far from Odessa. And the Jews are attacked. Again, no particular reason, but they are attacked. The women, wives, daughters, are raped and murdered, often in front of their husbands and in front of their fathers. And what makes Kishinev, what kind of makes it, what made it stick in the imagination, because of course there were lots of pogroms like this, is that a young Jewish journalist was asked to go and report on Kishinev from Odessa. His name was Nachman Bialik. He became the poet, basically the main Zionist poet. And he wrote a famous poem about the pogrom called The City of Slaughter. And part of what makes the poem powerful, he describes what happens. He describes the rape, the pillage, and just out of nowhere, he describes the murder, the blood. It's a long poem. It's an incredibly powerful poem. But the thing that made this poem unique is not the description of that, but it was the description of the men of Kishinev, of the Jewish men who watched as their wives and daughters were raped and slaughtered and did nothing. Not clear they could have done anything, but they did nothing. I want to read you a bit of this. It's moving, it's powerful. I don't know. Hopefully you get something out of this. It's just a section of the poem. As I said, it's a very long poem. You can look it up, City of Slaughter by Bialik, spelled the way it sounds. So this is from somewhere in the middle of the poem. Crushed in their shame, they saw it all. They did not stir nor move. They did not pluck their eyes out. They beat not their brains against the wall. Perhaps, each watcher had it in his heart to pray, a miracle, O Lord, and spare my skin this day. Those who survived this foulness, who from their blood awoke, beheld their life polluted, the light of their world gone out. How did their menfolk bear it? How did they bear their yoke? They crawled forth from their holes. They fled to the house of the Lord. They offered him thanks to him, the sweet benedictory word. The Kohanim, the priest, sallied forth. To the rabbi's house they flitted. Tell me, O Rabbi, tell, is my own wife permitted after she's been raped? The matter ends and nothing more, and all is as it was before. You know, there's another line here that is powerful. The concealed and coward, the sons of the Maccabees, right? So the Maccabees are the ones that are celebrating in Hanukkah, who rebelled against the Greeks and won and established a kingdom in Israel way back. The point of the poem is this. These men were powerless. They did nothing. Maybe they were cowards. They cowered. They hid. They did nothing. When you hear Israelis and Jews generally talk about never again, they're not just talking about the Holocaust. They're talking about Kishinev. They're talking about never will we cower. Never will we hide. Never will we just turn our backs. You can't understand the response in Israeli society to October 7th without understanding this commitment that so many Jews, particularly those in Israel, have towards never being cowards again, towards never watching their women raped and doing nothing about it. The whole essence of Israel is a country in which Jews will not watch their families murdered, not watch their women raped. A country which will fight for their life, fight for their freedom, fight for their dignity. Fight. Never again. So the Jews flee Russia. And again, 2.5 immigrate to the US, 2.5 million. But then in 1921, and by the way, the American administrations never really liked this, right? They're not exactly excited about the fact that millions of Jews are coming into the country. And, you know, they're already talking in 1910 about, oh, we need to curb immigration. This is not good. This riffraff of Europe is coming here. We need to do something about it. And you know, there's a lot of this in the air. And then finally, in 1921, a Congress passes something called the Emergency Quota Act. Now, they've been trying for 11 years to slow Jewish immigration. But more and more Jews are coming. And then, you know, Russia has a civil war. Remember the communists, the communists, 1918 to 1921. And more Jews are coming. They're fleeing because during the civil war, about 100,000 Jews are killed, right? Maybe more, maybe 150,000 are killed. So America says, wait a minute, we can't take all these Jews. Maybe it sounds familiar. And, just in 1921, 120,000 Jews entered the United States. So Congress decides to act. It passes the Emergency Quota Act, imposes quotas by nationality. The Jews have no nationality in the American definition of the time. They're either Poles or Russians or something like that. But it's clearly engineered to make sure Jews don't come. And it works. 3 years later, the number of Jews entering the United States have gone from 120 to 140,000 a year down to 10,000 a year. And by 1934, right, Nazis are already in power. And after this 1921 Quota Act is actually replaced by a 1924 Act that is more permanent, only 2,700 Jews managed to make it into the United States. So Jews are locked out. They're locked out of the US. They're locked out of much of Latin America. They're locked out of much of Western Europe. Nobody really wants them. The UK doesn't take them in. And there's a real problem in Europe. You can't understand the Balfour Declaration. You can't understand the eagerness of the British to form a Jewish country without understanding that there are hundreds of thousands of refugees in Europe escaping pogroms, escaping being killed. Romania, at some point in the 1920s, expels its Jews. Poland treats Jews really, really badly even before the Russians come, even before the Nazis come. But there's nowhere for the Jews to go. They're stuck. They can't go to America, can't go to Canada, can't go to Britain. France is not allowing them in. Argentina is not allowing them in. Not Brazil, not Australia. They've got nowhere to go. And, even though the Balfour Declaration is passed before, Balfour Declaration is towards the end of World War I, maybe it's 1919 or 18. By then, it's obvious that America is shutting down. From 1910 on, the Americans are talking about eliminating and restricting Jewish immigration to the United States. So you've got a real refugee problem. And the one imagined solution for it is to allow Jews to emigrate to what is then, at least post-1921, British mandate over territory they had captured from the Ottoman Empire. And a few Jews, and some Jews do that. Some Jews emigrate to what's called Palestine under the British occupation. They buy land. The wealthy Western European Jews are eager to help their fellow Jews from Eastern Europe settle in Palestine. The Rothschilds, other Jewish bankers buy land. They subsidize agriculture, and they basically help establish this settlements of Jews in this area. Now, I've talked about this before, but the fact is that as Jews are settling in this area, they're creating industry, they're creating agriculture, they're actually creating jobs, creating industry. And a lot of Arabs move into what is called Palestine in order to take those jobs. Very few Arabs lived in what is today Israel pre the Jews arriving there. I mean, there were some, but a lot less. Because there was nothing really there. Swamps and desert and a bunch of other stuff. So Israel absorbed some of these people in Europe, but very few, for a lot of reasons. One is it's a relatively uncivilized place. It's relatively undeveloped. It's very difficult to go there. E. Jones corrects me. The Balfour Declaration was November 1917, relatively early in the war. But again, the writing was on the wall, at least in terms of the United States. It had been on the wall for 1910. So some Jews go there, but it's a very tough place to go. And the British don't want them there. Not really. Once the British win World War I, and they've signed they've cut a lot of deals with the Arabs. And look, the Arabs have oil. The Arabs are, there are a lot of Arabs there already. The British are not really committed to this idea of a Jewish state. So they allow some immigration in, but not a lot, into this territory. In 1936, in Palestine, there was an Arab uprising, both against the Jews and against the British, to try to kick the British out and to try to kick the Jews out. But the Jews keep coming. Again, they've got nowhere else to go. After, the Holocaust, and it's really important to note about the Holocaust. Again, people perceive the Holocaust as this German thing. Germans did it. But the reality of the Holocaust is that the Germans could have never killed as many Jews as they did without the cooperation of people in the various countries all over Europe. Indeed, in countries where there was little cooperation, fewer Jews died. Denmark actually saved almost all of its Jews. It refused to cooperate with the Nazis, and it allowed the Jews to escape. Belgium's cities, where they cooperated with the Nazis, about 70% of the Jews were captured. Belgium's cities that did not cooperate with the Nazis, only between 30 to 40% of the Jews were captured. In Hungary, the Nazis wanted the Jews of Hungary so they could slaughter them. The Hungarian authorities decided, okay, and they basically shipped 470,000 Jews to Germany, to Auschwitz. But they only took the rural Jews, the Jews who lived in the little villages, the Jews who had not assimilated. The Jews in Budapest that behaved like them, that lived amongst them, they refused to turn over to the Germans. And indeed, almost all of the Jews of Budapest were saved. In Poland, there were pogroms, killing of Jews, before the Nazis arrived. In many cases, the Poles cooperated with the Nazis in killing the Jews. And little known in history, there were pogroms of Jews returning to their villages after the concentration camps, after they'd been liberated by the Americans or the Russians, returning to their villages in Poland, only to encounter local Poles refusing to accept them, refusing to give them their homes back, refusing to allow them to settle back in their homes, and kicking them out, sending them back to where they came from. In Paris, in France, the local French authorities rounded up the Jews and handed them to the Nazis. Paris. And again, the Nazis could have never done this by themselves. Just weren't enough Germans, and they were fighting a war, they were busy. Without the cooperation of people in these countries, there could have not been the scale achieved in the Holocaust. It just never would have happened. Italian Jews were rounded up, not everywhere, not in all of Italy. And Mussolini resisted in the beginning, but at some point they were rounded up. Jews were rounded up everywhere. If you've read Anna Frank diary, you know that they hid, her family hid. And they could have gotten away with it hiding, if not for somebody in the community, in the Netherlands, in Holland, in Amsterdam, ratting them out, as happened all over the place. Sure, there were some people, some places, some individuals who who did not work with the Nazis, who helped protect Jews, but the vast majority did not. So when the war ends and the Americans liberate the camps, and the camps are liberated elsewhere, many of the people in those camps, the non-Jews, go home. They go back to where they came from. Many of them are in much better physical condition than the Jews. The Jews were uniquely treated by the Nazis with the idea of working them to their death. So when the camps were opened up, the Jews were in particularly horrible physical shape. The Jews tried to go back to places like Poland, and the Poles turned them around and sent them away. They refused to let them back. And indeed, a couple of 100,000 Jews, Holocaust survivors, spent 2 years after the war in the concentration camps that they had been liberated from as refugees without a home, waiting to figure out what their fate was. In the United States, the Truman administration tried to get Congress to pass some kind of bill to allow these Jews to come to the United States. Congress refused. A combination of Midwestern Republicans and Southern Democrats claimed that they did not want these Jews. And there were these hundreds of thousands of Jewish refugees roaming around Europe in the mid-1940s, post-war, without anywhere to go. Some of them tried to make it to a pre-Israel British mandate, and the British caught the ships, turned them around, built a camp in Cyprus, and held them there behind barbed wire. These, again, people who had survived Auschwitz, people who survived the concentration camps, were now being held behind barbed wire in Cyprus. So when Israel declares its independence in May of 1945, there is a flood of these Jews into Israel. And these Jews are committed to one thing. They're going to make this their home. And as I said before, they're not going to tolerate being bullied. They're not going to tolerate being slaughtered. They're not going to tolerate being raped. There will be no more pogroms. They're committed to defending themselves. The 1948 War of Independence is a war of motivated individuals. They've just been slaughtered in Europe. There's nowhere else they can go. America won't take them. South America won't take them. Indeed, when the camps opened up after, when the camps are liberated at the end of World War II, there are lots of people in these camps who are not Jews. And they don't want to go back to Russia. They don't want to go back to communism. Or they can't go. They'll be killed. All of those are invited to emigrate to Latin America, to other countries, to all over the place. They all find a home somewhere. The one group that nobody wants, even after the Holocaust, even knowing exactly what happened in the Holocaust, the one group that nobody wants are the Jews. There's nowhere to go. Literally, there's nowhere to go. I remind you that my claim is that Zionism is a movement of self-defense, is the movement of people who are being oppressed, being killed, being murdered all over the world, that have nowhere else to go. And they build a civilized country. They build a home. They create it. They make it. They don't take it from anybody. They make it and create it. And Herzl, when he establishes the Zionist movement, 1897 is the first meeting of the Zionist movement. He says, look, he says during this period, he said, Europe is going to get rid of us. Europe does not want us. Europe will kill us. And there's no guarantee that won't happen anywhere we go if we leave Europe. The only way we can survive as individuals, the only way we can survive is by establishing our own state. He says the Germans, this is an age of nationalism, the Germans are Germans. They will not tolerate Jews who are both Jews and German. You're either German or you're not. He says this is a movement moving throughout Europe, this nationalism. They will not tolerate the outsiders with split loyalties. The Dreyfus argument. The Dreyfus had split loyalties between his Jewishness and his Frenchness. And it's what Tucker Carlson said the other day about Ben Shapiro. He has split loyalties between his Jewish loyalty to Israel and between being an American. The Jews have nowhere to go. And then in the 1950s, once Israel is established, the Muslim and Arab world decide to get rid of their Jews. So the richest people, I can't remember if 25% or a third of the real estate in Baghdad was owned by Jews. Jews were incredibly wealthy, successful in Iraq. The Iraqis expelled all their Jews. They weren't allowed to take their wealth with them. They left with whatever they can put in a suitcase, and they were kicked out. Most of them went to Israel. A few of them, who maybe had foreign passports, who could get in, went to France, Europe, maybe America, very few. But most of them, overwhelming majority, went to Israel. Moroccan Jews, they literally rounded up all the Moroccan Jews, hundreds of thousands of them, put them on planes, sent her to Israel. Some of them, the more wealthy and educated, again, had foreign passports, went to France, but almost all of them landed up in Israel. The Yemenite Jews, Yemenite, where the Houthis are today, were going to be slaughtered and killed, evacuated to Israel. Egypt expelled its Jews. Syria expelled its Jews. Lebanon expelled its Jews. And most of them made it to Israel. Committed to what? These are refugees. And indeed, they lived in conditions of refugee-type camps for many years in Israel. But they were committed to building a home. They were committed never to be at somebody else's behest, never to be dependent on the whims of someone else. They were committed to fighting for themselves, to securing their own independence. Now, I want you to look at it for a minute from the perspective of the Palestinians. These are the Arabs who lived in what was then called Palestine under British occupation, before that under Ottoman occupation, under the Ottoman Empire, not occupation, Ottoman Empire, and then as part of the British mandate. After World War I, they had beaten the Turks, and they owned this land, together with Jordan and Syria and Lebanon and Iraq. They owned it all. Saudi Arabia, they divvied up, and then they got stuck with this piece of land that was claimed by the Jewish population, but there was also an Arab population there. The Arabs see these Europeans coming. And for a variety of mostly irrational reasons, they reject it. They're tribal. These are people who are different. They have a different culture. And they reject their arrival. Again, even though the Jews coming are not violating anybody's rights, they're not stealing land, they're not taking property, they're still foreigners. from the perspective of the locals. And there are a lot of them coming. They're changing the culture for the better, universally for the better, but still. The Palestinians, the Arabs in this area, they have other models to compare this to. They have the model of Western colonization of other parts of Arabia, or the world of the Arabs. Maybe one of the most powerful stories of colonization is the one of Algeria. You know, the French occupied Algeria in the 19th century, relatively early in the 19th century. And many French people moved to Algeria, lived in Algeria. By the 1950s, there were 1 million people of French origin living in Algeria. Spoke French, French culture, but also spoke the local Arabic, and were integrated into Algerian society. They'd been born in Algeria, many of them, many generations had been born in Algeria. And in 1954, I think, there was an Algerian uprising. And by 1961, this uprising, which had involved, violence and rape and pillage and of all sides, the French versus the local Algerians, brutal civil war, a rebellion, uprising, war of independence, however you want to describe it. By the end of it, almost 1 million Frenchmen packed up from Algeria and left and went back to France, and Algeria gained its independence. Now, this is a period in which the Palestinians are starting to form an idea that they should have their own nationality. And indeed, they look at the Algerian experience and they go, look, it worked for them. Maybe it'll work for us. If you look at Yasser Arafat, much of his motivates him is this anti-colonialism. It's this decolonialism. Let's get rid of colonialism. And look, it worked in Algeria. We just have to commit enough terrorist actions. We just have to put enough pressure on them. We just have to kill enough of them. We just have to make life unpleasant enough for them, and they will all leave. And that has been the Palestinian prescription, from the river to the sea. We'll just put enough pressure on these Jews. We'll kill enough of them. We'll terrorize enough of them. And they will all leave, just like the French left Algeria, just like the colonial powers have left India. They've left all their colonies. The white men, these Europeans, have left. But this is the point they don't get. This is the point they refuse to get because they evade in order to get to this point. The Israelis have nowhere to go. They're not a Russian colonizing force, or a French colonizing force, an American colonizing force. There's no home for them. There's no way for them, like in India, the British could pack up and go back to Britain. The French, at least some French, even though they were born in Algeria, could go back to France. First of all, they were welcome there. They had French passports, and they were considered French citizens, and they were welcome back. If there were right now 8-9 million Jews coming out of Israel looking for a new home, nobody wants them. Nobody would accept them. The gates would be closed. It's not like America is saying, yeah, all right, let's wrap up Israel and bring all the Jews here. Like, nobody wants that. We've got a border crisis as it is. Yeah, I mean, my guess is we've got a bunch of anti-Semites in the chat trying to divert your attention elsewhere, but ignore them, I think, is the best strategy. The Jews have nowhere to go. Israelis have nowhere to go. So all the Israelis here, justifiably, when they hear river to the sea, is we're going to kill all the Jews. Because that's exactly what it means. Given that they can't throw them out, given that there's no way for them to go. And here I'm including all the Jews that came from Arab countries. Like Iraq is not welcoming the Jews back. Morocco has not laid out the red carpet to have all its Jews back. There is literally nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. And all that's left is for the Palestinians to realize this and to come to terms with it, because they better. It's the only way any peace can be achieved. Now, we would like them all to become individualists and not care who's Arab and who's Jew and who's this or... Yeah, I mean, that would be amazing one day. It would be amazing one day to live in a world in which nobody cared. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where suddenly everybody cares. Everybody emphasizes. Constantly. Your group identity, particularly when you're Jewish. That is the one group who nobody will forget. Nobody will let you forget your group identity. Nobody will let you pretend you're an individual. Not pretend, but nobody will let you live the reality that you're an individual. They'll insist that you're a member of a group and treat you as such. And one of the reasons I'm so horrified by immigration laws is they restrict our ability to move, thus restricting our ability to be treated as individuals. We're stuck with the identity of the place we were born with. Oh, you're Guatemalan. Oh, you're from Honduras. Oh, you're a Jew. That's who we are. That's how we're treated. So, Israel's not going anywhere. Israel is going to defend itself. And it's going to defend itself vigorously. And the reason it's going to do that is because they have no option. They value their life. They've gained a certain self-esteem that they lacked in Kishinev. Israel is a land of people dedicated to their own survival, dedicated to never again, dedicated to never being bullied, being murdered, being raped, being tortured again. Good for them. Good for them. You know, somebody says on the chat, so stop being Jewish. I mean, but that's a joke. It's a joke. Because Herzl stopped being Jewish. Dreyfus stopped being Jewish. Jews throughout the 19th century, early and 20th century stopped being Jewish. Many of the Jews sent to Auschwitz had stopped being Jewish. And it didn't matter to the rest of the world. Zionism as a self-defense project is a legitimate and a moral project. Ayn Rand was a big supporter of Israel because as part of that Zionism, they built and created a civilized state. The Palestinians' rejection of that state, Palestinians' rejection of civilization, Palestinians' rejection of the Jews, means that the Palestinians will continue to commit suicide. The Palestinians will continue to be destructive. So, yeah, I'm pro-Israel. I am pro-Israel defending itself. I'm pro-people who think of themselves as Jews, whether for collectivistic reasons or self-defense reasons. I'm pro them defending themselves, standing up to the people who would murder and rape and torture and kill them. And those of you who are not are on the side of barbarism. You hide your anti-Semitism, your hatred of Jews, your collectivism, by this pseudo-individualism, by this, every other group you accept. But the one group you refuse to accept because of your anti-Semitism are Jews, not because you're individualists, but because you hate this one group as people have hated them throughout history. So never again is a motto for Israel. It's a legitimate motto. And beware if you stand in their way. All right, let's take questions. Hopefully that was history. A lot of you didn't know. Put aside the trolls who are here, the anti-Semitic trolls who are here. It seems in force whenever I put Israel, Palestinians, anti-Semitism on the thing. Stephen, thank you. These are the stickers. Thank you. Ryan, thank you. Let's see. We had Gail, thank you. E. Jones, really appreciate it. $100. That's amazing. Thank you. Really appreciate that. RDF, thank you for the sticker. Jonathan Honing, 3 different stickers. Thank you. Appreciate that. Vinyl 867, thank you. Appreciate all the stickers. Really appreciate that. I'll just remind you, these shows are supported through contributions from listeners. You can support the show on a monthly basis on yaronbrookshow.com/membership. You can support it by becoming a member here on YouTube. You can support it by, if you're live, you can support it, of course, on Patreon and on, yes, I said that. You can also support it if you're here live with a super chat or with a sticker. The nice thing about the super chat is you can ask a question. You can make a comment. You can actually participate and shape the show. We do have targets for these shows, just in terms of what I think I need to raise on a monthly basis in order to keep doing these shows. So for the evening shows, we have a target of 650 for the morning shows, 250. We usually make those targets, so I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Those of you on live now, please consider supporting the show with a super chat. It's one more way to support the show, and it adds up to making the show possible and keeping it going and keeping it vibrant. Don't support it unless you support it, unless you enjoy it. All right, Will can't pronounce Nick's name. Says, Israel, A Concise History of a Nation Reborn by Daniel Gordis is a terrific read. Also, Semites and Anti-Semites by Bernard Lewis. Yeah, Bernard Lewis is one of the best historians in the Middle East. He's an excellent historian. I learned a lot from Bernard Lewis. I definitely recommend that. Semites and Anti-Semites by Bernard Lewis for a deeper appreciation of what Jews are up against. I don't know The Concise History of a Nation Reborn, but that is good. I would recommend following this guy who is, I found his stuff really interesting. Haviv, Haviv, Rettinger. I'm going to put his name in the chat. But he did this on Econ Talk. He did this podcast interview, and he was excellent. So I highly recommend go to Econ Talk, listen to it, and look this guy up. He's really good. He's really good. On this issue, I don't know if he's good on anything else, but on this issue, he's very good. All right, Stephen Pettit. Do you know the Eugene Ionesco play Rhinoceros about anti-Semitism spreading through France pre-World War II? Also a movie with Gene Wilder and Zero Estrell. I think I saw the movie years and years ago. Thought of moral relativism always precede a character turning into a rhino. Yes. Yes, I remember the movie with Zero Estrell. It's quite funny, even though it's a sad topic. But yeah, I mean, France was very anti-Semitic. It was very anti-Semitic in the late 19th century. I was just watching a French show called Paris Police 1900. Stupid name, but that's the name. Paris Police 1900, so like police force in Paris in 1900. And in 1900, there was a newspaper that was published in Paris called the Anti-Semite. And there were active groups, anti-Semitic groups all over France. And when the Dreyfus trial happened, they were very supportive of executing Dreyfus. And Dreyfus was sent to prison, and then he appealed. And they were convinced that he would win the appeal because they knew he was innocent. He was accused of spying for the Germans. But he was accused because he was a Jew for no other reason, and had split loyalties, just like Ben Shapiro, right? Just like Tucker Carlson accused Ben Shapiro. And they almost brought about a revolution, a change in government, bringing in the military in Paris. Dreyfus on appeal was found guilty again because of the political pressure I think that was being felt. Émile Zola, of course, wrote a lot about Dreyfus. And ultimately, he had to be pardoned by the French president because the legal system would not do its job. And clearly, he was innocent and yet prosecuted, even though Dreyfus was a completely secular Jew, didn't consider himself part of the tribe at all, and yet he was persecuted because the rest of the world viewed him as a Jew. So the Jews can try and dismantle their tribe all they want. The world will not let them. Will not let them. But yes, Rhinoceros is one of these absurdist kind of plays that was turned into a movie, pretty funny movie, but pretty sad movie. But there was, as I said, during World War II, it is the French police that rounded up the Jews and sent them to the concentration camps. Now, the Germans told them they wouldn't be sent to Germany, or maybe only the men would be sent to Germany, and it was the work camps, but everybody knew. Everybody knew. God, I wish the anti-Semites would leave my chat. Just go away. Nobody wants you. Nobody cares what you have to say on this thing. I certainly don't. Just go away. Varun, is anti-Semitism there in the Arab culture society? Oh, yeah. I mean, more so today than ever. But it has been there. I mean, to some extent, it's always been there. If you read the Quran, Muhammad has unpleasant things to say about the Jews, and he does horrible things to Jews. But during the Ottoman Empire, for the most part, Jews were treated pretty well until the 19th century, where it was Christian missionaries coming to the Middle East that brought with them all the kind of anti-Semitic stories and blood, what do you call them? Conspiracy theories. The Elders of Zion, the idea, this book, the Chronicles of the Elders of Zion, which is a book that circulated in Europe in the early part of the 20th century, still circulates and circulates extensively in the Arab world. This is a book supposedly it's written by the Jews, who are, this is their plan to control the world and to take over the world. It was actually written in Odessa, right after the Kishinev pogrom. And one of the things that the Russians couldn't understand is they didn't understand why all these other countries cared. Like the United States complained to Russia about the pogroms. The British did. Other people did. All these countries were complaining to Russia about the Russians killing Jews. And it's like, why do they care? They're just Jews. Why do they care? And they came to the conclusion that the reason they care is that they're being controlled by the Jews. And they and this one, this one publisher wrote and published this book called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, as if it was written by Jews, and it became a common book all over Europe, and now it's a common book in it's been translated in Arabic. It sells very, very well in the Arab world, and it's all this idea that the Jews control the world. It's a conspiracy that many people in the United States believe in. Margaret Taylor Greene, they control the what was it, the lasers, satellites. Anyway, it's believed in much of the world, buy into this idea that the Jews really do control the world. And, it's an historical fact that it was Christian missionaries that brought anti-Semitism into the Middle East. I'm pretty anti-Christian anyway, but that is just an historical fact. I learned it actually from Bernard Lewis. And any historian of the Middle East will tell you that that's actually true. Christianity is massively anti-Semitic. Always has been from the really beginning. If you read the early Christians, even going back to Paul and Paul's horror at, his whole idea of trying to separate Christianity from Judaism, and therefore make that separation strong and real. But so today, Arab societies are very anti-Semitic. Of course, as I said, they kicked out all their Jews from Iraq, from Morocco, from Syria, from Egypt. They expelled the Jews from their societies completely. And the kind of anti-Semitic literature you can find in Arab bookstores is like nothing you've seen ever. I mean, it's vile, it's awful. But most of it, almost all the stuff, they learned from the West. They learned from Europeans. Michael, did you see Noah Finkelstein and Russell Brand discuss why we should all hate the Jews? No. I mean, Russell Brand played into that. That is tragic and sad if true. Noah Finkelstein, I know. He's a horrible human being. Michael, I'm starting to think the reason we haven't collapsed yet is because Atlas Shrugged has influenced so many productive people's subconscious. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that. I think Atlas Shrugged has influenced a huge amount of entrepreneurs and some of the most productive people in the world's subconscious and their attitude towards their own lives, towards production, towards hard work, towards reason and rationality, towards independence and independence of mind, independence of spirits. I think that's absolutely, definitely the case. I think Jonathan is trying to start a thing where everybody just does 99 cents, right? So if everybody right now on the chat does 99 cents, we'd get pretty close to our goal. And Jonathan has done now, what, 5, 6 of these stickers at 99 cents. Any one of you can do a sticker for 99 cents, $1, and participate in supporting the show. And it's, anybody can afford that. And let's see how many people we can get to do a 99-cent sticker. Jonathan just did another one now. So Jonathan is trying to get this going, a 99-cent day. So if everybody in the chat right now clicks on that super chat button and does a sticker for 99 cents, we'll get, $5, $10, $20, $100 is better. But hey, let's do it. Use that, the fact that it's only 99 cents. David just did $19.99, so there's a theme here of nines. Honing is a multi-billionaire. If Honing was a multi-billionaire, I'd be complaining about the 99 cents, but I'm not. There we go. Grant just did 99 cents. All right, we can get this going. And that way you can provide support that is not really going to hurt and challenge your income or your ability to consume. This is the Iran's version of a dollar store. This will piss off Tucker Carlson and it piss off everybody involved. Apollo Zeus just $2. And we can also raise some money for a good cause. The good cause in this case is this show. Yeah. All right. Mark just did 99 cents. This is cool. You see, Jonathan got it going. I love it. Ian just did $1. Ian, you're messing things up. No round numbers. It has to be 99 cents. Linda just did $2. Her phone does even amounts. It won't let her do the 99 cent stuff. Okay, Jacob, thank you. Martin, thank you. All right, this is good. This is good. Jennifer did one earlier, $10. Thank you, Jennifer. And let's see, who else did I catch? Brian, 20 Canadian dollars. Thank you, Brian. And we had Wes for $50. Wes did $50. Thank you, Wes. That is amazing. Thank you. Really appreciate it. I know a lot of you don't have questions, but this is a way to use the Super Chat feature without asking a question. It's just do a sticker thing. Okay, we got Jacob, we got Martin, we got Jonathan again, and we got Vinyl doing another $1.99. He did before as well, and Stephen Harper doing 99 cents. All right, this is kind of fun. This is cool. All right, Simon, in the meantime, said, would you agree that the war between Palestinians and Israel will never end unless the Palestinians stop identifying themselves as such and will never cease to attack Israelis? No, I don't necessarily think that. I mean, they could, if Jews are Jews, then the non-Jews in Israel are going to have to, will identify themselves as something. I mean, again, ideally, every country in the world would be a country where people only identify themselves as individuals and nothing else matters. But that doesn't seem to be the case. So whether they identify themselves as Arabs, but I don't see a problem of them identifying themselves as Palestinians, but recognizing the fact that they're going to have to share this piece of land, the governance of this piece of land with Jews, some of them Europeans, some of them Middle Eastern, and create a civilized place in this geographic area, and that fighting over it is only going to lead to death and destruction. And that I think part of it is realizing, again, that the Jews are not going anywhere. They're just not going anywhere. All right. E. Jones says, this is a great lecture you're on. Thanks. Appreciate that, E. Jones. Frank says, you should make this speech at a college campus. Now, we'll be doing a campus talk at the University of Texas in Austin at the last Friday of the month, 26th of January. I'll be in Austin, Texas, and I'll be talking about Israel's moral war. And I'm sure I'll be using some of this material. So I still have to think about how to structure that talk, but I'm sure I'll be using some of this material. But thank you, Frank. I definitely intend, if I have opportunities, to give this talk on campuses and to get people interested in it. All right, let's see. We got Baker 221B with $2 Australian, which is, I think, more than 99 cents, but still, that's good. Jonathan, again, with another 99 cents. Jonathan, so we're slowly chipping away yeah. That's weird. Yeah. Apollo Zeus with €1, pound, I think. All right. But yeah, you can also ask questions. And you can also do like $59.99 or $199.99 or $299.99 or $499.99. I don't think you can go over 500, but you can use nines in all kind of creative ways in order to get the numbers up there, just for the fun of the super chat. So it's always great to get you guys involved. All right, we only have basically 2 super chat questions, both by Michael, of course, because he's asked, and now we got a third one that just came through, so that's good. Stringer Bell is asking about a movie by Ridley Scott called The Kingdom of Heaven. I can't remember that movie. What movie is that? Let me look it up. Kingdom of Heaven, Scott. Kingdom of Heaven, 2006 epic historical drama, filmed, directed, and produced. What is it about? The Third Crusade. Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I know a little bit about Crusades, but I don't know much about the Third Crusade. The First Crusade is really interesting and fascinating, but I don't know much about it. So, another one of my, I actually know a little bit of history to back up my anti-Christianity, but the First Crusade, I know a little bit about, but I don't know. And if I watched the movie, I think I saw it, but I can't remember it. I wouldn't know how historically accurate it was because I just don't know the history well enough to be able to say. Whoops, what did I do? I didn't mean to do that. Answered. Michael says, anti-Semitism is a political formation. It's not like ordinary racism. It's propaganda by Attila and the witch doctor in order to achieve power. I don't know if that's exactly right. I mean, anti-Semitism has been leveraged against the Jews for a variety of different reasons over many, many centuries, obviously. It really does have its origin in the very beginning of the Christian church as an attempt to separate Christianity from Judaism. There was a real attempt to demonize the Jews. And that only got more and more institutionalized into the church over time. There was also the fact that Jews were moneylenders later on in the Middle Ages, and that was abhorrent and perceived as abhorrent. The Jews were kicked out of England for a while because of their money lending and other, activities as merchants and stuff that were considered inherently corrupt. And they were kicked out of England. So anti-Semitism is not just an issue of power. It's an issue of trying to find explanations in the world, and for bad things that are happening, and finding scapegoats and finding the other as a convenient scapegoat to explain these things that otherwise seem inexplicable to the masses. Part of it is to write off debts. I mean, a lot of the murder of Jews in the Middle Ages and later was a consequence of killing the moneylenders that you owed money to, right? So it's interesting that the anti-Semites, particularly the version of them that seem to be attracted to my show, hate tribalism when it applies to Jews and love it when it applies to themselves, right? I mean, that's typical of anti-Semitism, is that it has this double standard where it only applies to Jews. All right. So I think it's much wider than a political thing. It's a religious thing. It's driven by hatred. It's driven by ignorance. It's driven by a need to find scapegoat in order to escape the consequence of one's own actions, like lending money and not being able to pay it back. Linda says, my phone only does even amounts. That's why the $2 instead of the 99 cents. Michael asks, have you seen the movie The Champion of Auschwitz? Probably the best portrayal of the whimsical nature of evil I've ever seen. No, I've never seen it. I can't imagine going to see a movie called The Champion of Auschwitz. But I don't watch generally. I try to avoid movies about the concentration camps. I've nothing to gain from them. I know everything I want to know about the concentration camps. I know they're evil. And I know, what they represent and what they were. I don't need to experience it as art. That's too burdensome. And I watched Schindler's List and I hated it. And I would not watch. I don't want to watch Holocaust movies. I'm just not interested. Stephen Harper says, I learned a lot of history tonight. Thank you, Yaron. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know. I mean, you guys tell me if you like these history shows. Part of how I tell whether you guys like a particular show is the number of people who watch it. So the views, the number of people who watch it generally, the number of people who are there live, and then the amount of money we raise in a particular show. That gives me an indication of whether these are kind of topics you like. I like to do the history shows, particularly given that I don't think people know history. That includes you. You guys are a pretty intelligent, educated audience. And I don't think you know history that much, right? Adam says, your judgment of self-identified objectivists who support anarchist vigilante raids of theocratic religious Zionists against their neighbors on the West Bank and Israeli police letting them do it without intervening. I don't know who you're talking about, so I don't know any self-identified objectivists who support this, but I certainly do not. I don't like religious anything. I don't like religious Jews. I don't like theocrats of any stripe. I don't like the Jewish religion, and I don't like people who take it seriously. And I don't like, as Adam says, the anarchic vigilantes of the yarmulke-wearing, so-called right-wing Jews on the West Bank. I think they're horrible. I think they're horrible. I mentioned earlier today about the tunnels, how much I dislike the ultra-Orthodox. I mean, I have nothing in common with these people. And I have nothing in common with these so-called religious Zionists who just attack their neighbors with no rule of law. I mean, it's despicable. It's something that Israel needs to squash in order to maintain its position as a civilized country. It needs to be civilized, and it needs to respect the rule of law. And in the West Bank, they're not doing that. Now, you could argue they have a bigger enemy in the Palestinians, but that is not an excuse. Not an excuse at all. Yair Rath, thank you for the 190 shekel. That's the 99 cents, but there's a 9 in there, so we will take it. And I appreciate any support you guys are interested in giving. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Let's see. I like numbers. Only 2 questions left, so if you want to ask a question, now is the time to do it. ARI had good growth last year, but donations doubled the year before. What was the key to you and ARI achieving such growth? Donations doubled the year before. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if I had to guess, the doubling was primarily a consequence of what's called planned giving. It's a consequence of some donors passing away and leaving a large estate to the Ayn Rand Institute. The Ayn Rand Institute has been the beneficiary of quite a few large estates recently, and that is the reason I think in 2022 it doubled. But the fact that in spite of it doubling, it still grew in 2023 is pretty amazing. I think the key is sticking to the objectives philosophy, sticking to the Ayn Rand's philosophy, not compromising, not selling out, not watering it down, and at the same time cultivating people who support the Institute, people who value what it does because it's sticking to the principles of objectivism, and who value it enough to, for example, leave a lot of money to the Institute when they pass away. And that has been a strategy for a long time, and it's working. I think also the results, the programs, the Ayn Rand University, the number of intellectuals we're training, I think that inspires people. And as a consequence, contributions are going up. All right, let's see. Mark Thomas says, sorry, I missed the first part of the show. It seems anti-Semitism is a common effort between today's Attilas and mystics, how to counter effectively. Well, the only way to counter it is to counter it as, as a form of evil collectivism, as a form of tribalism, as kind of as primitive, and to counter it with individualism, which is the ultimate antidote to all of these problems, is individualism, and of course repudiate just the sheer fantasy and ugliness and horror of the anti-Semitism of the past and of the present. And the reality is that if there was there is if there's rabid anti-French people attitudes, then you counter that by countering the facts that they present and by countering the whole perception of people viewing people as a group and judging people as members of a group rather than as individuals. Even if those groups exist, there is such a thing as the French, there is such a thing as Jews. That's not the problem. The problem is not the existence of a particular national identity. There is no issue there, right? You can be, and as a consequence, the problem is judging individuals based on their belonging to that particular group. Vinyl 8867. I visited the Polish town. The grandfather of my grandfather. Locals still confrontational. Fear we're coming to get property back. Yeah, I know. My family, my mother, I think, visited the Polish towns where her grandfather was from, where her father was from, and then grandparents. And yes, they encountered the same thing. They encountered the same thing. They encountered confrontational fear that you're coming to try to get your property back. Property rights, you would think. Why not? It really is the anti-Semitism, the hatred of the other is still there. The hatred of the Jew is still there. It's there and it is strong. It is strong, right? Richard says, a movie just came out in the UK called One Life about British humanitarian Nicholas Winton, who helped Czech Jews flee Nazism in World War II. From what little I saw in a video of you, it looks good. Yeah, I mean, so this is is this a documentary or a drama? There were a lot of these individuals who were unbelievably courageous and unbelievably brave and saved a lot of Jews from the Holocaust. So, yeah. I mean, there were a lot of stories like that, and they're inspiring. There were some good guys. There were many, I mean, not enough, but there were good guys. Apollo Zeus. Why does the Boston Celtics court look horrible? I have no idea. I don't think it looks horrible. Does it look horrible? No idea. Gail, this is the last question. All right. History helps integrate the why for us. Yes, I agree. I think history is crucial. I'm a huge fan of history. I think we don't know enough history. I think we're not taught enough history. Most of what I read is history. I just finished a book on Diderot, a figure from the Enlightenment. I just started a book. I didn't start a book. I started a lecture course on the Enlightenment by Alan Kors, one of my favorite, a really phenomenal professor at the University of Pennsylvania, historian. So I'm listening to a lecture series on the Enlightenment. And I've got one or two more books to read about the Enlightenment, and then I think I'm done with the Enlightenment for now. And I'll look at other eras. But I've done Christianity. I'm still interested in the history of Christianity. I did 3 books on Christianity. Reading about the Enlightenment now, and then we'll see where we go from there. I still want to get a better grasp of the period between the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. So the 16th and 17th centuries, I think are really, really interesting, and I want to get a better grasp of them. So that's where we'll be focusing. All right. Sponsor of the show is the Ayn Rand Institute. I encourage you guys to check out AynRand.org/start here, where you can, among other things, sign up for the Objectives Conference, OCON, which happens every year. This year it is in Anaheim in California in June, and it's going to be a blast. You'll share a week with 500 people who generally share your values. You'll create new friendships. You'll have a good time. You'll hear phenomenal speakers. You'll get to schmooze with those speakers and really talk to them. And yes, it is a real highlight for many of us who attend every year. It is a real highlight. Please join us. There's even a poker tournament. A bunch of objectives playing poker. By the way, I suggest ignoring the anti-Semites on the chat. Don't feed them. It's not worth it. Andrew says, do you view the American right solidarity with the Jews as properly motivated? Well, which right? I mean, the American right now is very split. There's a lot on the right, Tucker Carlson, for example, Candace Owen, for example, who are very antagonistic to Israel and to the Jews. I mean, what Tucker Carlson said about Ben Shapiro is disgusting. It's classic anti-Semitism, and it really is offensive. And Candace Owen, hates Israel. So I'm not sure what right we're talking about. If we're talking about the evangelicals, and the evangelicals are indeed huge supporters of Israel, it's not motivated properly. It's motivated by biblical prophecies. It's motivated by the idea that the Messiah is going to come and there's going to be a big battle, whatever. And the state of Israel is going to play a crucial role in the coming of the Messiah and the great, reckoning. And of course, the Jews are just pawns in this big, cosmic struggle in which when the Messiah comes, when Jesus comes back, they're going to have to convert to Christianity or else be fated for eternity in hell. Then there are some conservatives that are pro-Israel. Some of them are motivated for the right reasons, and some of them are not motivated for the right reasons. But it really depends. I mean, Ron Paul is very anti-Israel. Rand Paul, because he ran for president and because he's connected to the evangelicals, is kind of pro-Israel. The more traditional conservatives are all pro-Israel because they view it partially because it's Western. But so are traditional liberals. I mean, are relatively pro-Israel. So it's the new right and the new left which are really, really anti-Israel. And very few people support Israel for the right reasons. That is, that it's a civilized country. It's the essence of civilization. All right. Thanks, everybody. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Didn't quite make our target, but we did okay, I guess. And I will see you all tomorrow for a news roundup. This week, from now on, we'll do some shows, but it'll be while I'm on the road. Timing to be determined, topics to be determined. If you like the show, please like the show before you leave. It helps a lot for the algorithms to have you press the like button. So please do that. Also, share if you like it and everything else. John, thank you. John says, thanks forever. A great history lesson. Really appreciate the support. John, Apollo, Zeus, thank you for another 99 cents. We're slowly, we're getting a lot of people engaged with the 99 cents challenge that Jonathan got us rolling on. All right, let's see. Yes, Like the show before you leave. We have 80 likes, should have well over 100. Share the show if you can. I think this is a good history lesson. People should know about it. It's not that radical. It's just a straight history lesson. There's not anything I said here that is crazy. Well, not crazy. That is, that I think people would view as radical, right? Just straight. Richard, I got your super chat question. I answered it. Where is it? The movie about One Life? Yeah, I commented on that. Was there another super chat question? Or was that it? All right. Thank you, guys. I will see you all on. I will see you all on tomorrow morning, and then I'm traveling to Colorado. If you're in Colorado, would like to meet personally, don't forget the talk on Friday in Centennial, Colorado. You can sign up. You can find details on my website, yaronbrookshow.com. If you want to become a monthly contributor, Patreon, and yaronbrookshow.com/membership. Those are the two best options to do so. I will see you all. Bye.